From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here. From the Martian's future to the past of Kingdom of Heaven and all eras in between, English composer Harry Gregson-WILLIAMS has a way of going medieval with his way of conjuring orchestral power or evoking vibrantly hip rhythm with his talent for electronics, often combining both styles for maximum emotional effect in scores both long and succinct. Gregson's abilities have been on recent powerful display for the seemingly disparate eras of The Last Duel and House of Gooch, films whose common denominator is their director Ridley Scott. But on closer examination of two very different scores, the common theme that's revealed is bad family business and the often murderous emotion of where the truth lies amidst bonds rent asunder. In The Last Duel, it's evoking through a religious chorus and savage action the truth of a French wife's claim of rape that will drive her aggrieved knight husband in a battle to the death. For House of Gooch, it's evoking the playful Italian business skullduggery and the anger of a wife done wrong that will lead to assassination, music that announces itself amidst a sea of hip songs that chart a family's downfall. Both approaches make a strong impression in showing off the versatility of a vibrant composer for the ages. And now here to talk about scoring Vengeful Family Business is Harry Gregson-WILLIAMS. Welcome to Film Music Live, Harry.
Hi, how are you, Daniel?
It's great to have you here. Well, I guess let's start off talking about The Last Duel. Now, your very early musical experience was being as essentially a choir boy, as we would say here, and The Last Duel is essentially a choir-driven score, as it were. What was it like, kind of getting into that world, and finding the lyrics or just the songs that you wanted to use for the score?
Well, it's that comes quite naturally to me, as you point out. I have a background in choral music. That's really why I started off. So yeah, visiting. I could say revisiting Kingdom of Heaven was a very choral based score, but had a lot of action music in it. Had a lot of music in it. The Last Duel. It was decided really early on, but through a conversation I had with Ridley, that if I could find a variety, a fresh variety of voices, maybe soloists or groups, he'd really like me to explore that. So that was like a red rag to a bull. Yeah, I didn't hesitate. So one of the first things that I did, and during lockdown, Ridley contacted me about The Last Duel. He had already shot half his movie, and then the cast and crew had been disbanded to go into lockdown like the rest of us. And there he was, very impatiently waiting for a moment that he could finish his film. So he'd shot about half of it, and rather than sort of leave that half on the cutting room floor and wait, he's not a guy who's used to waiting for much. He wants to get to the meat on the bone. He stitched together his film. Him and his editor, Claire Simpson, put together a really impressive film that he sent me. Now, did it have many moments in it when a card would come up and say, Carouche rides off to fight the Scottish, and then another card would say, Carouche fights the Scottish, and then Carouche returns home, and then we'd actually see Matt Damon's character, as you would in a normal movie, in the finished movie. So there were many scenes missing, but he'd managed an extraordinary feat, really, putting this very intelligent film together, especially given the fact that the way that he's chosen to tell the story in 3 distinct chapters. So my first challenge, really, what he wanted me to focus on, because he was expecting to go back and shoot the rest of his film fairly soon, And he said when he did, one of the things he wanted to explore as to whether he wanted the Marguerite character to actually sing on camera at the end of the film. In the script, it mentions she may or may not mumble, whisper, hum a nursery rhyme or a folk song or something to her child who's playing in the meadow. So, Rid said, well, what would that be? I don't know whether I'm going to want that in the final film, but, if I do, I might want to shoot it, and we'll see. So, yes, that was the first port of call, really, was to find a tune that would not be out of place in the 1380s where the film is set. So, with the score, I was able to take some liberties in my orchestration and the way I arranged the music, the way I wrote the music. It doesn't stick to the boundaries that medieval music probably did. But with this particular song, it really had to sound very much of the time. So it's quite simple, really. There really weren't very many notes that were available to them in the scale that they would want to use at that time. And I've got a couple of mates who are specialists at that kind of music, which I can't say that I am. Medieval music never, I loved it. I sang a bit later than Monteverdi, William Byrd, these composers who wrote a lot of church music, and that's why I came to sing it. However, I consulted with Dave Buckley, who's an old, very good friend of mine, and an old assistant, actually, who studied music at Cambridge University. So he's very learned. I spoke to him and Richard Harvey, who's also I was going to say he's a medieval music specialist, but actually he's a specialist in many areas of music. He's a very extraordinary instrumentalist and composer. Anyhow, one of the first things I had to do was find a text, because I thought, well, even if I'd probably better deliver something that's got some lyrics, even if they go with the humming or the mumbling. So I kind of scoured around, and during the 1380s, it seems that troubadours were singing a lot of love songs. So I thought, love song from a mother to her child. So I kind of swiped one. Thibaut de Champagne wrote a lot of them. So I checked out a few of the lyrically, not melodically. So lyrics have to be PD. Obviously, the studio, Fox or Disney or Fox Disney or whoever it is, wouldn't have been too happy if I'd have used folk lyrics, from the public domain. So not from the public domain. So yes, found some lyrics, adjusted them slightly in French, and fixed them to the melody that we had, and sent that to Rid. He was like, "Love it, great. Well, I'll speak to you in a couple of months." So off he went and shot the last part of his film, including the final scene of the movie. And actually, the first cut that he turned over to me, I wheeled right to the end to see how he decided to shoot the scene. And there was Marguerite wasn't singing; she was smiling, doing everything you'd want her to do, being very happy that she has her son, and in a very beautiful meadow with wildflowers growing. So it's a gorgeous scene. So it wasn't necessary at that point. However, having got the tune, thought, well, let's use it. So that became Marguerite's theme, or at least it became the beginning of what turned into Marguerite's theme, which you hear throughout the score. Actually, in the event when we get to that spot in the movie, the very end, I think I can't remember how I arranged it precisely, but I think as she's smiling at her child, the moment where she might have sung this tune, I think some instruments start up with her theme very gently, maybe a lute, something like that. And then as we go forward, I think we go towards the end titles. The soprano who I found to sing the melody starts up singing the song that would have been sung by her. So that was really my first move on the film. And from there, I was able to explore and develop that medieval type tune, and and bend it to my what I needed for her to be able to help tell her story. So it was an interesting way to start, and very Ridley-like. He generally approaches music with a question. What would she be singing if she were singing? In which language would she be singing it? And those are the sort of questions one has to try and answer.
And that kind of brings us to our first question from Andrea. Given that you started out as a chorister, how much did the English music tradition shape you as a composer, and do you ever end up singing on your own scores?
Well, good question. I'll answer the last part of that first. No, I generally don't. I do recall in the long gone days of when I had a big studio on Venice Beach with a lot of people floating around my studio complex there. Dave Buckley was one, actually. Stephen Barton was another. Hallie Cawthry, really talented, awesome composers in their own right. Now, there was some film that I was doing that required, I think it might have been a Danny Island film, very, very low budget, if any budget film. And
The Whole Wide World, I think.
It wasn't that.
No,
that was back when I was at Hansa Studio. It was the very first movie I ever did. No, it might have been, I want to say Jolene, possibly. With Jess Chastain in it, but there was a scene set in a church, and Danny had some source music in there, but he couldn't afford even that, whatever it was. So we rustled up a Wavecrest choir at that point, and it turns out that Dave's an ex-chorister, Stephen Barton's an ex-chorister. Yeah, between us, we rustled something pretty decent up, which worked for that. So I digress, but that was probably the first and last time I sang on my scores. I generally don't. I'm not shy in understanding that if I have a forte, it's not going to be my prowess as a keyboard player or as a singer or as a guitar player. Instruments that I do play, I can play, I enjoy to play. But no, there are people who can do that better, and that's not really what I'm brought on board to do. I mean, wonderful. If what's the name of the chap who did Green Book? Forget his name, composer.
Okay. It's the Chris Bowers.
Yeah, right. No, the guy's a monster piano player. It doesn't hurt. I'm not saying you don't want to be an accomplished instrumentalist. I'm just saying, look at Hans. An accomplished composer doesn't necessarily need to be a virtuoso instrumentalist, but in some cases they are. Chris definitely. Bowers, he's a monster on the keyboards. However, so I haven't really sung on my scores, but yeah, it's really shaped me a lot. If you listen to any of the harmony that I gravitate towards, perhaps not in an action movie or something like that, but any emotional cue that I'll write, including The Last Duel, just my harmonic choices and things that move me. Probably, I spent so many hours as a youngster singing the music that was put in front of me then, and how I learned to read music at the time and appreciate music. And those, I could name a few English composers. You probably wouldn't know them because they're quite niche. They're English church music, Hubert Parry, Charles Villiers Standiford, John Ireland, these people. But just those harmonies kind of stayed with me. And when I fell into plopped into this moment of this great opportunity that I had to see if I could become a film composer, where else was I going to draw, and what moved me as a youngster? Now, there was obviously a time lapse between being a youngster and singing in choirs. I finished doing that when I was 12 or 13, and trying to become a film composer many years later. That was riddled with your David Bowies and all the rest of it, a lot of which have left their mark on me as well. But yeah, I can say, and actually anybody who's familiar with some of the music that I'm talking about from those English composers of the early 20th century, late 19th century, they might hear some influence there. Yeah, because it's not necessarily intentional, or it's not something I studied now, but yeah, a move to a second inversion from a certain way that a harmonic progression will move. Yeah, I mean, we must all have influences. It doesn't come from the ether. If I do, it's most certainly from there.
Yeah, and on that note, I have to give out a big shout to Richard Harvey. I'm a huge fan of Dance with the Stranger. Love that score. Let's get it out in CD.
Yeah.
One thing that I really found interesting about The Last Duel is essentially it's like a real life version of Rashomon.
Right.
And the first, essentially the story is told 3 times
Yeah.
in the film. And the first time, it's Matt Damon's character, and you really like this guy. He's not a bad guy, but then suddenly that rug starts getting pulled out, where it's revealed that maybe he isn't such a nice,
No,
noble guy.
I think he's revealed as quite a reactionary. I mean, he's obsessed with his own importance, his own standing with the king, with God, with yeah, and I'm not sure that one can entirely blame him. He was probably typical of a certain person of that era, of that stature. It would have been very unusual for him not to have the views that he had.
Yeah. I guess the question is, how did musically you want to reveal the complexity that that you'll soon find out comes
Right.
with what
Well,
happens?
I think my intention was that when I wrote his thematic material, I started out by writing a tune that reflected not the more problematic side of his character, but more the heroic kind of soldier that he sees himself as, and actually we see him as. He's a pretty damn good soldier, it turns out. Actually, I think at the very end we learned that he did get killed in battle, so he got his comeuppance eventually. But yeah, his tune to begin with is a rising theme. It's quite proud, a bit pleased with itself, and gradually that becomes much more complex when, for instance, the journey from when we see him first riding off to battle I think he's off to Scotland. I say his theme is quite carefree. It's broad, and not complex. Quite proud. By the time we see him riding off, well, he's not cantering off. He's walking. His horse is walking him off the scene of the duel at the end of the movie. His theme has become much more complex. I mean, thematically, I'm drawing from that original theme, but the notes aren't necessarily in that order, and they're interwoven now. But he's quite a complex character, and as you say, you start out appreciating him, for he seems to be a loyal kind of guy. But the medieval way was this kind of God and king, or was it king and God? Something like that. And those two things, I guess, the secular and the liturgical, become entangled and ever present.
So now we have a question from Louis Versalini. And again, I guess the question is really, how much music do you choose to write for a big blockbuster like The Last, or even Kingdom of Heaven, which is much more music in it? I mean, is it just kind of like plotted out even before the get-go how much music you're going to write?
Yeah, I mean, the first part of your question sounds like that's my choice. That's not. No. I mean, down to the minute, maybe there are some choices I'm able to make, but no. One of the first times that a composer will engage with a director is we have something called a spotting session. You're probably familiar with it, but we'll sit down with the director and we'll go through the film, and he'll say, "I'd like to try a music cue that starts as he walks through this courtyard, goes through the scene, and don't forget, I'd like it to be quite dark here. And as he leaves that area, I think the music can dissipate." And then we'll go through the whole film like that. And at that moment, that is then created as a cue, as a separate moment. So by the time I've had that meeting with a director, the goalposts have been drawn. I can add up how much music I'm going to need. I quite occasionally, using that same example, I might, when I'm showing Ridley or whoever, the director, that particular cue, I might, when I'm writing the music, I might think, it'd be really nice not to come in, not for the music to arrive as the director suggested, as he comes into the courtyard there, but to wait a moment and actually to come in when he turns towards another protagonist. And I'll point that out to Ridley. He might say, "Oh, great." oh, that's great. That works better. Well, he might say, no, mate, I want the music to start where I said, so we can duke it out. And but generally, it's not a question of how much do I decide to write. It's often dictated by what the film needs, and it's a discussion between director and composer. It's not dictated to a composer, but in a film like Kingdom of Heaven, very, very different to The Last Duel. In so much as on Kingdom, I scored the film that Ridley was wanting to make, which is now known as the director's cut, which is about 3 hours long.
Even better, I think, than the theatrical.
Yeah. And as we were scoring, I imagined, as I was working on it, that this was the movie. However, I just weeks before the orchestral session started, I think Rid said to me, H, I'm probably going to be asked to take a big amount of time out of this movie. So I said, really? How are you going to do that? Because I couldn't imagine what you could do. I mean, I know you can trim frames here, but take a big amount of time. He said, yeah, no, I'm actually got a plan. And he said, I've got a module I'm just going to pull out. And it was to do with Sibylla, the king's daughter, and her son, and his plight of having, and her fear that he was going to get leprosy like her father does. And it was very sad to lose, but he was able to pull it out, and the film became much shorter. But the reason I mentioned that is that whichever way, even with that pulled out, my assignment was huge and quite overwhelming. I mean, quite enough for 5 composers, in excess of 100 minutes of music. And in that sort of a movie, you don't get too many drone cues, Nah, it's all orchestrated, and quite specialist instruments were used. So in The Last Duel, when I came to meet with Ridley to begin with, when he had it indeed shot the whole film now and gave me the first copy of the film, the complete copy, one of the things that he suggested we try was to not underscore the body of the actual duel, and also the 3 or 4 battle scenes that we see, actually mainly Kurosh going and doing his business as a soldier. And I was quite taken aback by that. I thought, well, this is the first time that a Scott brother has asked me not to underscore his action, because certainly I did in Kingdom of Heaven. And he said, yeah, no, I think we want to keep the realism here, but your job's going to be equally important, if not more so. I'd like you to bring us to the point of battle, bring us to the point of the duel where the knights come together. And that's really important. And then let's look at where you can come back in. Maybe the last part of the duel, maybe as Matt Damon's character's got his man on the ground. Maybe we can come in here. And in one of the battles, maybe we'll come out of the end of the battle and sweep into another scene. So he had a concept for that, which I thought was quite brave, because, as I say, you look at a lot of period movies like this, and the battles are usually underscored, like they were in Kingdom of Heaven. So I knew that was something that we tried with a couple of the scenes, and really liked it. And he worked really hard with the sound designer. For instance, in The Last Duel, the actual duel that happens in Reel 7, right at the end of the movie, it's probably only 3 or 4 minutes long, the actual duel. I don't recall, but there's quite a big lead up to it. Well, there's a 2.5 hour lead up to it. I mean, there was quite a big lead up to that moment that I had to look after musically, that got us to where we were at the beginning of the film, which again had a long lead up musically, where the knights come together, and from there it was the horses snorting and the sound of the swords and their breathing. And I think that when we were final dubbing it, the final sound effects came and the final music. I think that we all got pretty excited about that choice.
Now, Eric Hines has a question about, I think, one of the really strikingly eerie effects in the score, which is, could you speak to the use of the solo voice, notably the tritone leaps and the ancient connotations that come with it, and how you used it in The Last Duel?
Yeah, you might have to be a bit more specific about which and where, the ancient connotations. if you're referring to well, Daniel, I was going to mention actually with the Marguerite theme, it was suggested that I listen to this wonderful soprano, Grace Davison, who hadn't done too many movies, but she's really, really well known in England. And she had precisely that. I listened to a few recordings of her. She had precisely the right tone I was looking for, which is not too much vibrato, not very operatic, but quite eerily still and accurate. So she was a voice that I was going to use, not just on the possibility of a song, but throughout the score. And I wanted to use a different voice. I wanted to find a different voice for Jacques Legris's theme and for his moments. And I didn't want to use something that could be construed as Marguerite's, the voice that I was using over her. So I cast my mind back to the beginning of Kingdom of Heaven, actually, where I had been introduced to this chap, Yestin Davis, who's a countertenor. And you may not be familiar with the range that a countertenor sings. First of all, a countertenor is always male, and he sings in the range of an alto or a soprano. So he's not singing in the range that I would sing in. It's an octave, if not more. It's an octave up, and it has this really haunting power, quality to it. So I investigated on Kingdom of Heaven all those years ago, found it really interesting. I think I used it in a couple of cues, but not featured at all. But I reminded Ridley about that. He said, "Yeah, no, that sounds interesting. Pursue." So I pursued Yestin. He was able to record some tracks that I sent over to him. So his is the I actually sent him a couple of Sibelius files. I sent him a couple of cues with music for him to actually sing, follow the music. And I sent him a couple of wild tracks that I wanted him to do, where he would take, where I'd written in Sibelius 2 notes, probably a perfect fourth, perfect fifth apart, and just written a line between them. Quite easy music to write that, I found. And with an instruction to glide, to swoop slowly between the 2 notes. And then I asked for various variations, various iterations, so that some were quite aggressive, some were really haunting, quiet. So he sent these wild tracks back to me, and I was able to incorporate them into Cubase, which is what I work in. And it became a real motif for Jacques' character, and quite dark and imposing, without being the bad guy and the low brass or something like this. So I was able to balance those 2 things, which was exciting, because with the soprano and countertenor, they're not really mistakable for each other. There's a very different quality between the 2.
Now, I want to jump several centuries ahead to talk about House of Gooch, and I guess we'll alternate between the 2 scores. And I really believe that, the number of minutes that a film score has doesn't negate the power it might have.
I know why you're saying that. That's
so Fluxy Film Talk it has a question: what's it like scoring House of Gucci, where there's a relatively small amount of score, but I loved it when it was there?
Well, I pretty much echo your sentiments, Daniel. I loved scoring House of Gucci. Was it in any way similar to any other film I'd done? No, not at all. I have done a few films with a large amount of needle drops. I did the Shrek movies. They had, well, the first Shrek probably had 45 minutes of score, and about 30 minutes of songs. That's a lot. As the Shreks went by, the score did more of the heavy lifting. There were fewer songs, more score. So those aren't really comparable. Bridget Jones, The Edge of Reason, I did. That had a lot of pop songs in it, current pop songs, and my job was to kind of weave in and out of there. But there was a core there that I was able to hang on to that represented Bridget's emotional state, which was often a bit messed up, to put it bluntly. Yeah, on Gucci, it was clear when Ridley shared the first cut with me. Well, he actually had me go up to his cutting room in West Hollywood here, and I jumped into one of his edit rooms and watched the movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great fun. I thought the acting was good, and I liked it a lot. but there was a lot of music in there, but not score, no temp score, none at all. And we had lunch afterwards, and I said to Rid, so, man, I think I'd like to go away and see if I can find a place for a score. And he said, that's exactly what I want you to do. But, you know, this is the way I want to do it. Pretty much where the songs are now, and this was a rough cut of the movie, that's where I want them to be. And I think, unless there's a reason why I can't use one of my choices here, I think the songs that you hear there are the ones that I want. So there was very little maneuvering for score, but you know, clearly there were some scenes, particularly around about Lady Gaga's character, where the score was able to come and create some thematic material, however slight, and it was fun trying to find instrumentation. You know, because the movie's sort of 80s, 90s, there's a little bit of synth going on, which I never say no to. I love that. A little bit of bubbling synth, a mandolin, bit of an accordion, some plucky things. I think I might have put in a ukulele in there somewhere, and some strings. I did a session of strings in London. So yeah, the amount of score is not comparable to any other movie that I've done. But then you got to bear in mind, I've done a lot of Ridley Scott movies where The Martian or, I don't know, Deja Vu, we're talking like 90 minutes of score in those. Excuse me. So that's quite a lot. So I don't know about minutage in this movie, but it still wasn't, didn't make it any simpler, really. Trying to find a path for the score and an emotional arc for the character that I wanted to focus on was challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it when suddenly there's cat people when she discovers that the Gucci knockoffs in the market. I particularly love the bit where she like looks at a ring.
Daniel, that's the scene. For instance, that's a scene where that I love that needle drop. But you know I tried to score that. I got rid of that song just personally in the studio one day. I thought, what could work as score here? But and I tried this in a couple of spots, but you know, there's something about the way that some of these songs just hit you. It put you in mind of absolutely the era exactly, that was unbeatable. Really, whoops, it wasn't really necessary to mess with that. So I focused entirely on the parts that I felt could use score, and in some cases, you know, when I presented it to Ridley, he's like, I think I really don't think we need it here, but I love it. I'll have it. Send it to the final dub, and if we need it, we'll use it. So you know, ultimately, it didn't end up with very much music, 15 minutes of music or something, if that. I don't know. I didn't add it up, but it was really a joyful thing to work on, especially after the last duel, and with the same crew. You know, Darius Volsky, there was the cinematographer, Claire Simpson, the editor. Yanti was the costume. You know, it was very much the same crew, and I think it was all quite a relief to come from medieval times to, I don't know, barely, but almost contemporary times.
Now, Pulse has a throwback question for you. How did you go about finding the theme for Shrek?
Probably sitting here at my piano. I mean, I wasn't in this studio. I was over at Hans's studio at the time. But yeah, no, you know, those sort of things. I think I had in my mind's eye, before I was asked to do Shrek, I had in my mind's eye, if I had the opportunity to write a plaintive, slightly melancholic tune with some emotion, I had been brewing something, but I hadn't had the opportunity because I hadn't come across the film that could take it. You know. And it didn't need to have been an animation. I could have written it I would have tried to have written it for any film that gave me that opportunity. But you know, the C minor, G minor thing, it's not. You know, I'm over being slightly embarrassed by the simplicity of it. I always remember John Powell saying that, "Don't worry about it." And I'm like, "Geez, man, it's pretty. You know, it's almost pentatonic," and I have no idea why. He said, "It sounds great. It's fine. Don't worry about it." But you know, at some stage, one just has to put out what one feels is right, and I hope that it is. But I don't remember specifically the day that happened.
Now, La La Land has been cool enough to have infinite cities for us today, and it's a really enjoyable, crazy action film that brings you back to Anton Fuqua, who was one of
Yeah.
the very first people you worked with on
Uh-huh.
Replacement Killers.
Huh.
What was it like scoring it? I mean, it's definitely not the kind of score you'd expect for a film like that.
No, well, it was a difficult film to work on, and not because of Anton in any respect. He's a lovely man, really sweet, gentle, focused, smart, considerate, and picky. Yes, but which director isn't, and why shouldn't he be? It was difficult, not for any of personal reason. It was difficult, although this was a lockdown movie, it has to be said. It was difficult because of the story. I felt it was a tricky story to tell for all of us, the actors. I mean, it really has so many layers. One of the reasons it was tricky was that it actually was COVID related. The post production was endless, and you might say, well, the more time you have, presumably the better it'll be. But generally, I would agree with that sentiment. But I guess we were all unable to be in the same room. The edit room, I don't know how Conrad Buff, the editor, who I've known for a long time, actually I know he did the Equalizer thing, but on that, way back, I did a film called Seraphim Falls, which I think he was the editor on. Wonderful film editor.
Great movie.
Yeah, and he was wherever he was locked down, and so picture came very slowly to me, very slowly, infuriatingly slowly, turnover. So yeah, it was a struggle. It was a struggle, but I don't, I would do anything Antoine asked me to do. He's a hell of a good guy and a great support. There were moments in that movie where I was able to almost kid myself I wasn't scoring an action movie, because I'm kind of allergic to action movies. I don't know why people keep asking me to do them. I'm doing a movie concerning no humans at all at the moment, and I'm loving it. It's called Polar Bear, and polar bears don't talk, so there's no dialogue. There is a narrator though. It's the third Disney nature film that I've done, and I may be the last, because I have a feeling that this one's going to go straight to streaming. The other two, Monkey Kingdom and Penguin, I did, which I loved. I mean, who doesn't like penguins? That was a couple of years ago now, but it's a beautiful task, man. You get to, there's enough budget to be able to record a real orchestra. There's a narrator, and then there's the animal that they're filming. Beautiful scenery, and often a wonderful story to tell. So,
Now,
yeah. No, I was just about to say, I think that may come to an end. I can't imagine that they'll keep making those movies. I don't know how cost effective they are, but from a composer point of view, they're a dream.
well, hopefully not. Now you've mentioned Tony, and again, I think all of us dismissed the very distinctive energy that he brought to his films, and I'm a huge fan of Deja Vu, maybe even my favorite collaboration that you have. And
Really?
and Vig, I loved it.
No,
it's a very unique time travel movie. And
I know it is unique. Some would say hokey, but there's something about it. I don't know, that period of my life, Man on Fire, Deja Vu. Yeah, I think those of us who were with me in my studio in Venice at the time, I think we were pretty aware we were working with a one-off guy, and certainly a maverick. Yeah, an amazing chap, really. Always so supportive and caring. Difficult, really difficult to please. I mean, really difficult, like excruciatingly so. Like, I'm gonna have to give all this up. I can't keep doing this that much. But we kept coming back because of his nature. His loyalty was not. I don't underestimate that at all. His loyalty and his generosity, but man, was he was just so particular. Any old shit was not going to work. Not that that's what I was trying to give him, but I mean, and I mean, the writing was on the wall very early on. I think I'd done Enemy of the State and Spy Game, maybe, and then he asked me to do a commercial, and I'd never really do commercials. I've never really done commercials or anything like that. And because it was Tony asking me, and it was Marlboro cigarettes, which I smoked at the time, I said, yeah, sure. So, but the writing was on the wall. It's like a minute commercial. I'd swear he must have beaten me up for 5 weeks on the damn thing. And just like every frame of every moment of every bar of the music had to be exactly how he wanted it. And I thought, whew, man, glad I don't do commercials too often. And someone said, no, that's all right. Commercials are okay. It's the director you're working is pretty picky. But you know, I loved him for it, and you know, I never, you'll never hear me complain about him, because you know, I'll tell you how difficult he was, but I will never complain about my experience with him, because you know, how lucky am I to have had those halcyon years? I mean, the only bummer, you know, obviously the sadness that he's not here now. But he had a good time doing what he did. I know he did. And he was a perfectionist. And when I look back on my little contribution to his work, which spanned from 1996 to the day he died, the only bummer is that I didn't do True Romance. Freaking Hans did the one that everybody's like, oh, you worked with Tony Scott. Did you do True Romance? I'm like, no. I was the old governor. Yeah. But I can't deny that True Romance is one of my favorites. It's not my favorite though. My favorite is Man on Fire. I don't know why.
Yeah, great score. So
why about that? But the film, yeah.
Well, now Paul, his favorite score, I believe, would be Narnia, and he'd love to know what inspired you to do the score of the line "The Witch in the Wardrobe," and what was the process, and how did you create this world of sounds?
Well, it was really exciting for me, and I wasn't, you know, I again, I had great fortune. The only reason I was asked to do Narnia was because the guy who directed the first couple of Shreks had become a friend to me, and he was asked to direct Narnia, and then he brought me on board to do it. So how lucky was I? But you know, it's a book that every child, when I was growing up in England, would have either had his mum read to him, or you know, they'd read at school. Excuse me. I don't know about how much that can be said true. That would be true in America, whether children would have grown up reading that. But that really was it was one of the essential books. I think it was read to me. I don't recall reading it myself when I was little. And you know, there've been various iterations of it over the years. And you know, I loved his books, and I couldn't believe it when Andrew asked me. And again, we actually had quite a relationship because we'd worked together before, Andrew and I. So he gave me quite a lot of space at the beginning when he actually buggered off to go and shoot it in New Zealand, which was no coincidence because he's from New Zealand. Beautiful vistas and stuff. But he took off a long time to shoot it. Actually, the very first thing that I did was Tumnus's, what do we call it? Tumnus's Lullaby, I think. He sent me a PDF. So he sent me a PDF of some prop, which was supposed to be an instrument, and it had a sort of mouthpiece kind of thing, and then it parted at the end, so there were kind of two ways that the sound could get out, and the fingerboard was like this. So I thought, well, hold on a sec. He's like, oh, I've got to shoot this in a week. You know, Thomas is going to be playing this. You've got to give me a melody that I can play it on the. I'm like, oh, okay, gosh, I was doing something else. I was scoring another movie at the time. So I rattled up a tune, and he liked it. And they used it when I got the first copy of the film. When I got to that scene, I could see Tumnus was playing my melody. Was he finger syncing to it? No, he was not. It was miles off. It was what the heck went on there? I thought you said you were going to have him sync to it, Andrew. It's like, yeah, well, it's not the way I wanted to cut the scene. It's different. You're just going to have to rearrange it. So I think that was my first experience on there. But, you know, creating that world, the Narnia world, was beautiful. Voices. Found this, was thinking of kind of snowy parts of the world. Thought of Finland was one country. I investigated what national instrument they might have, and it's a kantele, which is kind of a bit like a hammered dulcimer. It made a really crystalline sound, beautiful. so I had my themes written and had a few cues written, and Andrew was liking them, and I just sent them. We found out who was the leading exponent of was this guy called Timo in Finland. I never met the guy. I don't know. We sent the music over there, and he sent it back. Sent the lead line back, and Cantele played quite a big part in that score, as I recall.
Now, Bara is a 13-year-old aspiring film composer, and sure, that film scoring is my passion, and I want to do it for a living. So I'm thinking that if I start at a young age, I can learn much.
I think you're right. I think I can't. I'm often asked, what would be my advice to a young film composer? And I'd say, get a good musical education. If you can, study music. It's not a prerequisite. You don't have to. The reason I can say that, and we all know that there are two extremes. Let's think John Williams, and someone who clearly must have been through music academies. I mean, he must have. Who knows harmony, and he has a very, very solid musical background. And then you've got many others who create similarly evocative, amazing music, like Hans Zimmer. But he hasn't had a music lesson in his life now, and they're both valid. But Hans is very, very perceptive, and although he may not have had formal training, he listened to a lot of music. He's found out he does his homework that way, and he knows his way around, and he knows how to tell a story. Primarily, that's his forte. So I think there are a couple of different extremes there, but I'd say, you couldn't harm your chances of being a film composer if you've got a really good, solid understanding of harmony, melody. Why not?
Now, Theodore Sandberg has a question, and I suppose it affects any artist. Like, how do you deal with composing on days where perhaps the other areas of your life are very prominent in your mind, or you just don't really feel like you're in the mood, but it's got to get done?
Well, it's got to get done. Yes, it's got to get done. Well, it's weird because we are, to all intents and purposes, we're kind of self-employed. So it's not like an office job where you go to the office at 9 o'clock and punch out at 5 o'clock or whatever. So if I find if I can't get in the right zone first thing in the morning when I plan to, I am able to say, okay, well, I'll juggle whatever commitments I had that evening, and I'll allow myself not to torture myself this morning. I'll do something different. I'll exercise, or I'll do something very different, or do another part of the job, not compose. Maybe I'm compiling a soundtrack album for the last score, or whatever it is. But I think, and then maybe come back to where you are. And, I've learned over the years to try and give myself the most opportunity I can. Oh, goodness, sorry. Oh, I think my dog is biting my butt. Looks like a Muppet. It's not. Yeah, he's reminding me that he is here.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he's a lockdown puppy. It was either another child, and I have 5 of those already, so or a puppy, and I let my children talk me into this bundle of love. So yes, I think we all struggle with it. I think we are kind of self-employed, but it does need to get when there's no button you can press to make it happen without you. So at some point, you got to push yourself forward.
And I guess this could go to a question from Nadira Islam. Do you wait for inspiration to write your scores, and how do you structure your schedule as such?
No, I don't wait for the muse to hit. I schedule my time out that I've got tonight. I'm going to be, maybe after the children are in bed, I'm going to put in a long night, and I'm going to come up with something that I like that's going to help me go forward. If it's just a harmonic shift, maybe I'll be sitting at the piano. Maybe I'm past that stage.Maybe I've got like a little harmonic progression that I like, or a melody, the beginning of a melody. So I'll sit down and say, okay, tonight is the night. I'm going to realize that melody. Melody's going to go on a clarinet. Harmony's going to come from the strings. Going to add a little bit of brass, maybe a timp, whatever the thing is. Or maybe it's a series of synths. You see a bunch of synths in the studio. Maybe it's a synth night, which is always fun. Yeah, Boys with Toys night. Yeah. But yeah, it's a serious situation because one can't be left with nothing for too long. And, you know, as a composer, there's a lot of prevarication goes on. You do tend to put things to a side. But some stage, you've got to come up with the goods.
And that, again, would go to Ralph's question. Obviously, orchestrators are an important part of the team in getting the job done. What's your approach with working with your orchestrators?
Well, to all intents and purposes, I have to say I do orchestrate my own music. I don't take a credit for that because I really don't. You know, I've never quite understood the Alexandre Desplat music composed, orchestrated, arranged, sat on, stood up, and produced and did it by. Yeah, we get it, Alexandra. Yeah, so I'm going to compose the music now. My long-standing collaborator, one of them, Lad McIntosh, he will be my orchestrator, and in some respects, he's orchestrating the music. But he's in the classical sense of orchestration. You might find that you know a composer might have a piano chart, like a piano tune, and he might throw that to the orchestrator and say, orchestrate it. So yeah, the orchestrator is not composing anything there, but he's blowing it out. It exists as a piano chart. No, let's have strings doing this. He's going to have to orchestrate the woodwinds doing that, the brass doing that. So to my mind, that's orchestration. So it's not quite what happens in my process. My process, I do what I've just described. I write the music. I program it through Cubase. So it's going to sound almost like the finished thing. Obviously, it's not going to be as good as the finished played live thing's going to be, but everything's going to be there. So where I want clarinet, there will be a MIDI part that says clarinet, and the notes will be there. And also the volume of that part will be there. So what my orchestrators will be doing is listening to that and taking that clarinet part and sticking it into Sibelius. So he's not going to be thinking, ooh, it would be nice to put an oboe there, or to put the violins doing this. There's no room for maneuver there. But it's a very, very important part of the task. And given that fact, it's shocking that many composers, including myself, give them so little time to do their job. Because, well, we might say, why? Well, you know, not on the polar bears that I'm doing at the moment for Disney Nature. I love that thing. I've still got 4 weeks before I stand in front of an orchestra, and I've probably only got 10 more minutes to write, 12 more minutes, and a few fixes to do. So we're good. But no, go to a movie like Infinite, or an action movie, a big Mulan, I don't know, some big movie, studio movie. You know, the edit room are scrambling, not us, the composers, but, you know, the film is changing every day. Cut this scene down, move this scene to here. And then they pass over the film to us, and we're scrambling, man. We haven't got weeks to. Every day, one's trying to play catch up. So we're trying to create something new to finish the score. So there are outstanding cues that haven't been written yet, but also maybe there's 60 minutes of music, an hour of music. That's, you know, a symphony and a half in Haydn's terms of music that used to fit the last time I looked, but it doesn't anymore. They've cut the film, and my big downbeat comes right on her face as she starts crying. Oh, it shouldn't be there. Right. So all that's got to be, so we got to play catch up. All that's got to happen before it can go to the orchestrator, because what you give to the orchestrator is going to be what's going to be on the music stand when I stand up on the podium and start recording this stuff. So we've got to wait until the last minute till we get as close to the cut as possible that the filmmakers want. And then we'll toss it over to the orchestrator. So they get very little time to do their job. It's very important, very crucial.
Now, Dale says, you know, beyond the always fantastic music, the mere sound of your scores has always long been a league of its own. Now, are there any sounds or tricks or pointers or breakthroughs that you'd like to share?
Not really. I became interested in so in terms of creating music through a DAW, as they call it, DAW. I don't know, what does that even stand for? Well, I know Cubase is a DAW, right? So that's how I create my music through a programming sequencing, right? Some people use Logic or Pro Tools, whatever they use. So there are two sort of aspects to that. One we'd call MIDI, which is inputting notes, selecting a trumpet track and then playing that trumpet part into the sequencer. And the other would be using audio files, so dragging audio files in from your custom audio folder into your workspace. And those wouldn't be a trumpet phrase, because why would I want to be using something that's already, no, I want to create that. No, but more likely it would be a sound. Maybe it's a little rise into a cut. It could be anything. So I got really fascinated with the audio side of things, bringing sounds that don't necessarily, you wouldn't think would belong with an orchestral score, and trying to build a sort of hybrid sound. I became really interested in that when I was asked to do a phone booth, a movie that not many people saw probably, but back in the day, and it needed an entirely unorchestral score, and that was the first time I'd ever tried to do anything like that. I'd always leaned on the tools that I knew and loved from all my musical education, instruments. But no, this had to be synth drums, guitars, fine, but not orchestral. It just didn't work in the streets of New York. It wasn't what was needed. So having done that, I had spent that time doing the score for Phone Booth with just focusing in on making sounds, like making a synth pad. And instead of going to a box that you can pull down some presets and says a low synth pad, instead of using that, maybe taking that and modifying it to make it sound how I would like it. And then at the end of that project, saving those sounds into an audio folder. And I've done that ever since Phone Booth. And I have that folder right here. I wish I could show you. Maybe I can. Excuse me, dog. Swung this around. Probably all going horribly wrong right now. Let's see. If we go to, oh, good God, where are we? Oh, yes, we want to find the, we can do this. Hold on. I don't know whether I can do that, Daniel. I'm going to drop the computer. Everything will go wrong. So when you have I've collected sounds. Every time I score a film, maybe not Gucci, maybe not The Last Duel, because these aren't really the scores I'm talking about. Infinite, for instance. During the making of that score, I'll create various drum loops, various interactions between synths, maybe sort of moving arpeggiated synths that I really like. Obviously, I wouldn't be creating them. I really begin to appeal to me. And I'll use them in the score. And after the score, in the kind of aftermath of the sweat and blood has been spent, in the week or two after a score, I'll go back into the final cues of that and just isolate some things that I really liked that I made. Like, for instance, I have a whole folder that's dedicated to reverses, reversing a sound. I mean, wow. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ways of doing that into a cut. So, for instance, in an action, maybe there's some sort of a build happening into a slam cut to one of our characters. It's a pretty great idea to have something move you into that. So what sort of sound could it be? Something like I made with my lips then. It could be a reversed piano sound. I remember actually after Spy Game, here's a good example of what I mean. After Spy Game, I think I just discovered this technique. It's maybe a bit cheesy, I don't know. I still use it. I love it. But I discovered it then, that if you go to your piano and play like a low D octave, record that, and then get the audio file and flip it over, it'll start with nothing, and it'll come at you, but it'll come at you with a tone. So it's not like having a drum do that. A drum also, you flip it over, can do all sorts of things. So I mean, all these things fascinated me have continued to fascinate me for years. I remember hearing the score to Leon, the Professional, and just loving that score and thinking, my God, this is amazing. And I remember at the time I was at Hans's place, and I said to her, I was doing Replacement Killers, and I really wanted to find a way of using. I had some reason to use like a backbeat of some sort, and I didn't want to use like a snare drum, something. And I had been talking to Hans about the score that I really liked, The Professional. And Hans said, "Why don't you use that bag of tricks that that composer uses? That kind of sonar sound." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "There's a," and I said, "But yeah, but what is that? How would I?" He said, "It's a tambourine, man. It's just tambourine. Go to the transpose, -24. Bob's your uncle." I'm like, "Oh, really? How? Yeah." And it blew my mind that the gloves are off here. I mean, that sounds really simplistic. It does. It sounds really silly, but it's true. That's what I was exposed to early on in my time at Media Ventures with Hans. Was like stuff that he'd explored and got the kick out of, years before me, probably. And he passed that on. That kind of inquisitive, look, try it. Do something different. Why not? And I thought, okay, well, wow, a tambourine sounds pretty cool. Like detuned 2 octaves. I wonder what else you can do with things. And so consequently, I have, I've taken a great pride in creating specific things for scores, and then not just reusing them in my next score, but saving them in a folder. And if I really liked what I did, go back to it and modify it, make it better, or make it a cousin of that one. Now, some of your viewers may think, well, he's just copying what he did. No, a little bit, but do you think Mozart never had beedle-dum, diddle-dum, diddle-doo-dum? I mean, beedle-dum, bada-bum, yeah. I mean, yes, these are our ticks. These are our kind of habits, I suppose. Actually, I might be able to get closer to showing you this, what I wanted to.
Oh, please do.
Yeah. Here we are. So if I go to open audio in my, right, here we go. We go to sounds, go to custom audio, we'll go to audio. See, look, this is my audio folder here, and EQZ is equalizer. So that score was based on a bass riff. So I've cut them up. They're all in loops there. Now I'm not going to use that in another score. Of course I'm not. But loops, I mean, takes many hours of many days, of many weeks, of many months to make like customized beautiful loops, and you put them into a movie. And then they're gone forever. But no, why should they be gone? They're something I created. This is Cowboys and Aliens, by the look of it. Call of Duty, Deja Vu. See what's in Deja Vu. See, look, at BPM tempo, 63. Might even be able to hear something. He's turned it down. What have we got here? Maybe not. But these are just things. As I say, they're not ready-made cues or anything like that. But clearly, on Deja Vu, there were a lot of beats that. Oh, here we go. Okay, well that doesn't belong to Deja Vu. I don't even know what cue it was in, but maybe it was part of like a massive, great drum fest. But like maybe I'll pull that in to my thing, and that'll be the start of something. Oh, that's very Deja Vu. Well, it's very me. But when I created that, that's not even that in itself is not a single sound. That's being created by 4 or 5 different sounds probably. So I'm going to go to something a bit orchestral percussion in here. So look, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So yeah, so a lot of this stuff, I've always thought that I can try and build on. So I'm very happy that. Well, actually, I forgot what the question was now, but
well, it's awesome. I appreciate it.
It was something to do with sound, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But we strive to try and make our own sound, but it's difficult because there are only so many notes, and there are so many bloody films, and there are so many good composers, who got there before you. Would I have liked to have written Shawshank Redemption? Yes, I would. I would like that to be mine. A beautiful piano things and those delicate string things. Yes, but unfortunately, Tommy got there first. So I'm not going to do that. I got to find a tiny, tiny little thing that maybe one person will say, "Oh, that sounds like Harry." So and in amongst all this isn't a competition to do that. We're trying to tell the story that we have up on the screen in front of us. So, and obviously that's our main prerogative. But at the same time, to try and create some sort of a sound or some semblance of it coming from you as opposed to just someone anonymously.
Well, I'd say you certainly have. And I guess on that note, beyond the polar bears, what can we expect up ahead from you?
Well, my brother and I, and I'm not saying we are going to, but I'm saying we probably are going to. My brother Rupert and I are doing, are we doing already? An HBO series, which I'm very excited to talk about, but I'm supposed not to talk about. So yeah, he called me and I called him. We're like, well, we didn't have such a bad time. We did this Clooney thing called Catch 22 a few years ago. We had a great time doing it together. And we grew up making music together, so it's not a stretch. But we're geographically we're far apart. He's in England, I'm here. He comes over often, but we had a good time on the Catch 22 thing with Clooney. So we teamed up on a really, really good sort of HBO TV thing. He's more experienced at TV than I am, so it's good. Although he's my baby brother, he's kind of leading the way. So there's that, and there's my polar bears coming. And I'm not saying that Chicken Run needs a sequel, but if it did, I might be doing it.
So I guess my last question to wrap up the show, when this whole horrible thing started out, you had Milan, which was about to come out, just a terrific live action remake, excellent score. And now it's kind of in a way gone full circle where House of Gucci appears to finally be the movie that is getting adults back into an actual movie theater. I mean, how does that feel to kind of run that gamut, as it were?
Yeah. I mean, when I look back on Milan, I don't, the disappointment of people not seeing it in theaters was pretty great. I mean, I would imagine it was even greater for Nicky Caro, the director. Huge disappointment, and just unlucky, really unlucky. But I think we all got over that. And what are you going to do? It's the world's problems were far greater than Milan not going into a theater at that time. So yeah, moving past that. And we seem to be coming full circle. Let's hope. And yeah, no, all I can think of when I think of Gucci is I think of fun and a good tale to be told. And I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to do 2 Ridley Scott movies in a year. I don't take anything for granted. I don't. I hear he's shooting Napoleon. Is he going to ask me? I don't know. I might ask you. All right.
Well, I hope he does.
Yeah, probably ask Zimmer, Pemberton. I don't know. I mean, the guy's been through what? Goldsmith, Zimmer, Horner, Vangelis. Jeez. No, if I get the call, I'd love it. I'd love nothing more.
I think it would be awesome.
Well, we'll see. But in the meantime, I'll be busy with other things, I'm sure. Actually, I took on this movie that the director sent me the movie. This is during lockdown as well. I took on this movie. He says it's a bit unusual, this movie, Harry. It's an action movie, but there's not much action because he knows me. He knows I don't really want to be doing action films. So I said, okay, sounds intriguing. Any actors in it I know? No, you won't know anybody in it. I went, okay, great. Much of a budget? No. Well, is it going to be good? Yeah, it's going to be really good. You're going to want to do it. So he sent over a link. And I put it on thinking, what could this be? This could be well, I dreamed, what could this movie be? So the movie started off, it's very tense, a lot of soldiers running around. They appeared to be kind of Lebanese or Yemeni soldiers, or they weren't speaking English, there were a few subtitles. And I started to get really engrossed in the movie, but I was about 20 minutes in and I thought, well, hold on a second, is this even in English? Because it just continued in subtitles for the next 100 minutes. So that's why it was unusual. So it's actually a movie from Pierre Morel, who actually contacted me when he first came to LA with Taken. And we might have done Taken together, but one of us isn't a very good judge of how successful a movie's going to be. It wasn't him. Yeah. So I did this movie, which is entirely in Arabic, concerning an ambush. It's called The Ambush, that took place kind of Black Hawk Down, but in the Middle East, with no American participation.
Well, Harry, I mean, whether or not you did Taken, I can definitely say that you have a very particular set of skills that has been put to very, very good use. And I just want to thank you for joining us today at Film Music Live.
Welcome.
Get the last dual score on Hollywood Records, with the film now on video on demand, and House of Gucci, of course, in theaters. And I think its soundtrack with the Suite of Your Music is going to be, I think it's going to be on Sony. Thanks to our show's producers, Dale Turner and Mark Northam, and special thanks to Dan Goldwasser at Scoring Sessions, Johnny Grigg, Jeff Sanderson, and I'll see you all next on Film Music Live. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Daniel. See
Bye,
ya.
everybody.